Okay, my name is Salahuddin. I'm preparing for the competitive exams for the last 4 years. I have mm, I have attempted CSS and PMS twice each. So the purpose behind making this video is to deliver lectures on British history. And you might all know British history is one of the evergreen subjects. In in this meantime, in four consecutive attempts, I had the privilege of securing very good score in CSS and PMS, respectively 75, 70, 72 in PMS and 70 and 70 plus again in CSS exam. So in this regard, we are going to make a series of lectures covering all topics uh, mm, because on on YouTube, on Google, uh, there is no such book which comprehensively covers the entire syllabus for British history. So in this regard, we are going to cover the entire syllabus, PMS and CSS, uh, British history, which will almost cover every aspect of British history. So let's start with the British history. You might know British history is the syllabus is not is 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 all other subjects we have. There are topics starting from one and then the next and thus goes on. But we have in British history, it is divided into eras. Basically, it starts from the Glorious Revolution 1688 and until uh, now. So in this meantime, whatever happen or happens, so there are expectations that the question can be set from the favor history, or a question might be asked from the today's British or today's in this current world. You might know Brexit is also one of the hot topics. So it can be from anywhere, starting from the favor history to right now. So let's start with the Glorious Revolution, which is the first in the most important topic of British history. And if you go through the past papers, in and you will notice this question have been asked in every single paper of British history. Every year a question is set on this topic, Glorious Revolution. So we will have an introduction on about the Glorious Revolution, why it is called Glorious Revolution, what happened in Glorious Revolution, how tumultuous was this revolution, and what changes did brought bring this revolution in the history and specifically in the history of England. So glorious revolution actually, in this revolution there is a power transfer from one king to another. uh, in the glorious revolution, Until 1688, England was highly compounded by brutality mm, and, and coercive force. The king was authority in all aspects. He was all in one. Parliament had no space. Whatever the king would do, he could. The judiciary, the clergy, they were all under the influence of king. Though really, the clergy was powerful, but in this time, it was compounded, or it was influenced by the king. Actually, James, the who is the protagonist of the British Revolution, he came to the throne on 1685 after his father Charles. In From 1685 to 1688, he was highly despotic, he was tyrant, he was sole power in all aspects. Therefore, the people of England, they were highly abonistic. They were loathful toward the King James too. So here in this glorious revolution, a peaceful transfer of power took place. James fled to France, and the daughter of James and her in his son-in-law William of Orange came to the throne of England in 1688. Thus, the transfer of power took place peacefully. Therefore, it is also called glorious revolution or bloodless revolution because no bloodshed, cruelty, and killing, butchering, nothing observed in this revolution. First, we will talk about the causes of glorious revolution in detail, and then after causes, we will be trying to discuss each cause comprehensively. So, what were the causes of glorious revolution? So, starting from the causes, the first one, efforts made by James II to restore Catholicism in England. This was the first cause, and we will talk about in detail of the first cause. Secondly, efforts made to repeal the Test Act. We will also talk about what was Test Act and what is mean by repealing the Test Act, and how does it become a cause of glorious revolution. Thirdly, dispensing with and suspending of the acts of the land. Fourthly, establishment of the Court of Ecclesiastical Commission. Fifthly, interference in the internal affairs of the universities. Sixthly, James II's cruel treatment with his enemies. Seventhly, maintaining a standing army. Eighthly, friendship with France. Ninth, discontentment in England and Scotland. 10th, declaration of indulgence. 11, trial of 7 bishops. 12th, birth of James II's son. 13th, difficulties of William. Right. So we are going to talk about in detail of each cause of the glorious revolution. So the first cause was efforts made by James II to restore Catholicism in England, right? In England, there were two types of people by faiths. One was Protestant and the other was Catholics. So James too was himself Catholic by faith, and majority of the subject of England they were Protestant by faith. They were the believer of the Anglican Church, and Catholics though they were believer of the Roman Church. So James too was Catholic by faith, and he he was trying to convert people from Protestantism to Catholicism. Though James was Catholic by faith, it was bearable for the people. But when James started to convert people from Protestantism to Catholicism, it was really unbearable for the people of England. And this act of James too stirred the emotions of the masses of England. So this was the first cause, the efforts of James too of converting people to Catholicism. In in this meantime, in this first cause, the efforts made by James too converting people from Protestantism to Catholicism, however, there were two parties in England, and those parties was not as much flourished at that time, though they had names and as well as some associations as well. And those two parties were Tory and Whig. Uh, it will be another topic, and we will talk about it how the party system evolved in England, what was the motto and slogans of those parties, how they were different from each other. So we will talk about it in the coming lectures. So these two parties, Whig and Tory, were also displeased by the uh, James II, this forceful conversion from Protestantism to Catholicism. So this was the first cause. Secondly, efforts to repeal the Test Act. Effort, efforts to repeal the Test Act. What was Test Act? Test Act was an act passed in 1673. In this act, there were certain religious restrictions imposed on Catholics. The Catholics could not join public office, they could not be appointed to any public place or position. So what James too did, which result in the displeasure and stirred the emotions of the people of England. So he started or he repealed this act. They were Protestant and majority of them were Protestant. So repealing this act highly despicable for the people of England. In thus a hatred for James too was increased in the mind and hearts of the people. So this was the second cause, that repealing of the Test Act. And this act was a kind of an eyesore from James too, because he could not make any appointment of the Catholics. Under this act, no Catholic could be appointed on any public position. Uh, James too ordered the parliament to repeal the act, but the parliament, on its refusal, at once did away with the parliament, which resulted in bitter conflict between parliament and James too. So this was the second reason, and the third reason is dispensing with and suspending of the acts of the land. James too began to use his suspending and dispensing power in order to benefit the Catholics. For the pleasure, for the will and welfare of Catholics, he would suspend and dispense whatever uh, it could make the Catholics happy. So, but the people and the parliament could not bear such action of the king, because the repealing of the laws was an assault on the constitution of the country. It was a challenge to the rights of the parliament, and parliament was not in favor of this, and so there was a better conflict arise between James II and the Parliament. In this under this constitution, which was framed in 1641, so the Parliament could not afford it to that James II could go with the same suspending and dispensing power. So thus uh, the appointments that James II made both in court and his military uh, displeased the parliament. This was the third reason, suspending within dispensing of the act of the land. And then the fourth cause of the glorious revolution is establishment of the court of ecclesiastical commission. This court was established by James II, and what was the function of this court? So in this under this commission, in order to pursue his religious aim and make forceful admittance of the people to his religion, means Catholicism, James restored the prerogative court but with a changed name. He changed just the court's name, and Court of Ecclesiastical Commission was called it. So the Long Parliament had enacted against the establishment of such courts. The Parliament was not in favor of this court to be envisioned to be established. Parliament was against this court. What was the function of this court? This court, the this court was the function of this court was uh, to forcefully convert people from Protestantism to Catholicism. And what is significant about this court is a very tyrant, brutal man known as Jeffrey. He was appointed as the Chief Justice of this court. And, and anybody who dare to oppose James II Catholic faith was tried by this court and awarded deterrent punishment. So this establishment of this court uh, was uh, the parliament, the people of England was not liking it. They were against the establishment of this court. So this was another reason in the mm, paving the way for the glorious revolution. And fifthly, the fifth important reason of the glorious revolution is interference in the internal affairs of the universities. James too started interfering in the internal affairs of the universities. James too wanted to bring Catholic minded students. To achieve that end, he started appointing Catholic teachers in the Oxford and Cambridge University. Even he dismissed Newton, mm, the vice chancellor of Cambridge University, because he refused to award MA degree to a Catholic candidate. James too dismissed all the 25 fellows of the Magdalen College of the Oxford University because they refused to accept uh, farmer, mean the Catholic, a Roman Catholic is their president and instead elected Hawk. So James thus also uh, poked in the internal affairs of the universities, which consequently resulted in the glorious revolution. Sixth important reason is James' true cruel treatment with the with his enemies. James too was very cruel with his enemies, and he was so cruel in awarding punishment that once again it recalled the bloody days of the Bloody Mary. It was an event. It was an event took place back in. It's very uh, so very mm, highly dejected, and it was kind of tragic event that took place. So James not only hanged them but even punished their followers as well. He was not only hanging his enemies, whoever in England would raise voice against James too, he would hang hang them, as well as the followers would be brutally uh, killed, and even the bodies of their dead bodies uh, were hanged top on the trees. Thus, this cruel treatment of James too resulted in glorious revolution. And to some extent, it is also said the historians say that the even the prisoners, those were sold as slaves in the West Indies islands. So seventhly, maintaining a standing army. James too had raised a very powerful army against some revolts that took place, and and like and so the chiefs of those revolts were Duke of Monmouth and Duke of a grill. So he uh, equipped a very powerful army against these two chiefs uh, in suppressing the revolts. In this meantime, when he suppressed the revolts about these two chiefs, he maintained the standing army. But not only maintaining it, he increased the power as well as militarily. It was highly more equipped. The reason behind maintaining the standing army was to suppress a revolt of rising in England in his empire ships. So any revolt against Jim II could take place would be highly and brutally suppressed. Thus, maintaining this standing army and even increasing it was highly disliked by the people of England. So this maintaining standing army, after the said aim by which it was maintained and it was raised to suppress the revolts against England, and then maintaining it and suppressing the revolt of the own masses, the own people of England. So this was a kind of another factor or a cause in the uh, glorious revolution. Number eight, friendship with France. France and England, they were two dagger-drawn enemies. Uh, James too was Catholic by faith, as we discussed earlier in the start of the lecture, and Louis the 16th, he was also Catholic by faith. The majority people in England, they were Protestant by faith. So James too had very good terms and condition with France, and they already fought many wars, 100-year wars, 7-year wars, lot of wars. Both the two great powers took place in these two were great naval power as well as military power in all aspect, and they had great army. Thus, they both these two countries would often head to head with each other. This the friend the close friendship of James II with France was not uh, people of England would not like it. They were highly displeased by this good terms and condition because in some wars England was defeated by the French and in other French was defeated. So thus they both were dagger drawn and would not in a position to have good terms and condition with each other. Thus this specter also resulted in the glorious revolution. The ninth reason is discontentment in Scotland and Ireland. Scotland and Ireland, they are now states of England. We will talk about it, their status, their position, and what currently they are and how they operate, their policies, internal and external. But at that time, Scotland and Ireland, these were two specific areas of England. In these areas, the Protestants were also a majority. They had also Catholics. They have their own church as well, known as Presbyterian Church. So, what James II would do with these people, he was also cruel with these people of Scotland and Ireland. Both Scotland and Ireland were under England, uh, but James II made them his enemies. How he made them his enemies? By his obstinacy, by his obduracy, by his rigidness. Uh, Even James too would appoint brutal and cruel men on the high position in both those two uh, areas where the people of other faiths would be uh, cruelly treated. This discontentment and kind of uprising took place both in Ireland and Scotland. Uh, 10th important reason is the Declaration of Indulgence. James II proclaimed Declaration of Indulgence for the general welfare of the Catholics. To please Catholic people, he declared this act. Under the Constitution of 1641, Catholics, and even in Test Act that we talked about it, that was imposed on 1673, no Catholic would be appointed on high position, both in government, both in church, or any other place. They were they were completely expunged from these positions. So, in this declaration of indulgence, all those restrictions were removed from Catholics that were imposed upon the Catholics. Uh, this policy highly resented the people of England. This declaration of indulgence was another factor in uh, paving the way for a glorious revolution. So, 11th important reason is the trial of seven bishops. So, the people had not yet reconciled to the first declaration when the very next year, in 1688, James issued another declaration and asked the clergy that the declaration be read to the people on first two Sundays of the month of June. Uh, in this declaration, the people were were said to be uh, uh, on the two Sundays of the month of June. You should read the said declaration. The priests were against it; they would not like it, and what James did with those priests, he charged them with treason and arrested them. So the thus the church too become the enemy of James too. This was another reason in the glorious revolution. Our 12th important reason is the birth of James II's son. The people of England, they were highly dejected from the James II's policies and his cruelties. But the people had had an array of hope that James II was um, uh, sonless, means he had no male son. He had no children, male children. Thus, this ray of hope in the people compensated people for a while that after the death of James II, we will get free from the cruel policies of James II. But once his birth, the birth of James II's son took place, people were highly uh, fearful that the same policy that James II, the policy of suppression that James II is following, will be carried on if his son grieveth. Thus, this birth of James II's son was another factor in the making the glorious revolution possible. Difficulties of William. It is a common belief of the historians that the revolution would not have been possible if William had not needed the help of England against his bitter and staunch enemy, Louis XVI. William, who was the son-in-law of James II and the husband of Mary, uh, he was supported by the people of England in coming to the throne of England. Though, on the other hand, the French they were highly and against this uh, power transfer, but the people of England, on the other hand, supported him in all and every aspect, and thus make the safe and peaceful transfer of power took place while James II fled to France and his son-in-law William of Orange and his wife, the daughter of James II, came to the throne with the help of the people of England on the throne of England. So this is all about glorious revolution, and if there is any question related to the said topic, must ask in the comment section, and we are reading your comments and will be responding as well. Thank you so much.